little did we know that this past weekend WWE would out of essentially nowhere. Now the story was great and we liked it just like we like a lot of things in WWE, but little did we know that whether you're talking AEW, New Japan, Ring of Honor, TNA, that WWE would pull out the absolute match of the year in almost everyone's eyes, including WWE recognizing it following the event by having an encore presentation of the match after Monday Night Raw this past weekend. Netflix. I'm talking about Mask versus Mask. And it showed us that, hey, WWE, they can do something different than AEW, but they can also do what AEW does it well when it comes to putting on an absolute great match. Now, Brandon, I know you texted me first thing on Sunday morning about, did you watch this match? And I came home late on Saturday night and heard already all about it and made sure to watch it. But even in that sake of watching it while I was kind of falling asleep in the middle of the night, I knew that I needed to watch it again. WWE has since put it on every platform they can, reminding you, hey, watch this again. So this ends up being match of the year in everyone's eyes, I think, in the WWE and maybe even outside of that. Why do you think this is match of the year for you? What did you really enjoy about this? And we're really hoping that we get more of something like this in the future from WWE.
I mean, it checks all the boxes. I mean, it like the atmosphere, like the whole pomp and circumstance. Obviously, in the lucha culture, wearing a mask is a very sacred thing, and losing your mask is also a very kind of a sacred thing as well. And like just the way their entrances were, the overall presentation, the crowd was so invested, and it was and obviously Chad Gable lost. He's now unmasked as Chad Gable, so the original El Grande Americano is no more, and Ludwig Kaiser is the one, the only El Grande Americano.
What did you like? Because I actually wasn't that familiar with some of the traditions that go along with being unmasked. And
I believe it. I might be getting this wrong, but I want to say it was like a mariachi band. I think is what I want to say. And again, if I'm incorrect on that, I do apologize. But I've heard mariachi bands play over the years. It's a beautiful sound. The music was just beautiful. It had, the kids call it aura. It just had aura from the beginning. And the thing I liked about it is Chad Gable, had his family in the ring after the match. And he went from getting booed the heck out of the building to once he was unmasked, they were chanting, Gable essentially, or Chad Gable. Like it was like a heel to a face just because he took his mask off and showed his face. And the match itself was phenomenal. Everything about that match, it was just so compelling. Like two guys that are arguably two of the best wrestlers on the planet. I mean, and you know this, we've been doing this podcast for almost 10 years. I've been saying push Gable for as long as I can remember. It's been such a long time. And matches like this frustrate me as a fan because I want to see more Chad Gable. And I also want to see more Ludwig Kaiser because they both deserve a lot of credit. It was a hell of a match. I want to see more of this.
One thing I wasn't that familiar with what I was saying when it comes to some of the traditions are the fact that when you unmask, it's not just unmasking and that's it, but it was like having to essentially give out, all of his information about who he is, that kind of thing. And a lot of people were kind of saying that they made up a middle name for Chad Gable, and that's not true, actually. Edward actually is Chad Gable's middle name. Now, his real name is Charles Betts, but it's Charles Edward Betts. So, yes, Chad Gable is the quote-unquote WWE name, but Edward, is his actual middle name. So there is some truth to that, but I wasn't necessarily aware. Now, for people who may not have understood, maybe you can kind of help me out a little bit as well, because I followed this through the WWE eyes. What essentially I see happening on Raw and a little bit through AAA, but mostly through the channels of Raw and SmackDown is why exactly do the fans absolutely love Ludwig Kaiser, a.k.a. El Grande Americano, so much more than El Grande Americano, the original? Now, I kind of picked up a few reasons why, but what do you think was some of the reasons why he was such a face?
It goes back years. I mean, there's videos that have surfaced that Ludwig Kaiser he just ingrained himself in the Mexican culture. He was singing some famous songs. I think he was singing stuff with Penta. There was a video that I saw out there a few years back. But he knows the language. Like, he speaks the language. And like when they're doing like that fun, like asking questions, he's answering all the questions that cater to the Mexican audience. So he knows what he's doing. It doesn't hurt that he's also dating a Mexican television personality. Like he just, to me, he loves the culture and he embraces the culture. And because of how much he legitimately loves the Mexican culture, I think the Mexican fans love the fact that, you know, he's a European from Germany that embraces the culture of Mexico and the Mexican culture. And I think the fans just really loved it. And they can tell that his love for lucha is real. It's not a show. It's not a show. Nothing against Chad Gable. I thought Chad Gable did a great job. Chad Gable is one of the best wrestlers on the planet. I've been saying that for years. But I think the reason why more so they were rooting for Kaiser versus Chad Gable is because of those reasons. He speaks the language. He's like ingrained himself in the culture. And I think the fans really appreciate the fact that he went the extra mile to really, and it's not even just because of the character. He's loved the Mexican culture from what I've seen in videos years prior to this. So to me, it's genuine as heck. So I love it.
He's fluent in English, he's fluent in German, and he's fluent in Spanish.
So he's what, trilingual?
So what is now we talked about this last week when we were having trouble just pronouncing the name of the event itself. So Brandon, really, what is your excuse? This guy grew up in Germany and he's fluent in Spanish. And we grew up in a place where it's essentially a double language and not so fluent in Spanish. So good on him for that, being fluent in more, he had to learn English.
Seen it though. I don't know if you've seen on social media, but people are saying, hey, learn the Spanish language. You could really make a great living if you're a wrestler and you're struggling. Learn the Spanish language, develop some skills in lucha, and look what happened to Kaiser. Kaiser was getting buried on the main card, for a long time. For a while he was Gunther's mouthpiece, not really mouthpiece, but like his I guess you could call it his Howard Finkel. Yeah, his Howard Finkel. He was like his personal announcer. And you could see flashes of how good he is in the ring. But guess what? WWE was not doing anything with him. So in a different way, he retools. He knows the language. He knows the culture. And guess what? He's got so much stock built up. He could leave WWE forever and make a ton of money down in Mexico because they love him down there.
Well, I mean, he is technically still working for WWE while he is. I know,
but the point is, he could leave WWE. And he would make a hell of a lot of money in Mexico, and I think obviously in the United States, but more so in Mexico because he's unlike any non-Mexican lucha star that we've seen, like the Pentas, the Rey Fenixes, obviously Rey Mysterio. He's so different because he's not from there. He's from literally across the pond, a whole different part of the world.
What do you make of the idea that they're not even hiding? Obviously who the identities are, meaning that JBL made the comment about the last time that we saw El Grande Americano's girlfriend was in an elevator in Florida, right? So the fact that they're like not hiding this thing at all, I understand that we know as fans it's the worst kept secret in the world. But do you think that actually adds to the fun that obviously Michael Cole always, Corey Graves had to apologize to Michael Cole saying you were right, it was Chad Gable all along. Those kind of things. Do you think that adds to the fun that we know who they are and they're essentially telling us who they are?
Yeah, I think it's fun that it's obvious who we knew all along who these two were, and we know who their compadres are. Their running buddies. We know all of them, but just the fact that some of the personalities are kind of playing into the character role of it and saying, are you sure? I don't know if that's really him. Like, I love that. It creates more interest and intrigue. And overall, like you just said one particular word that is very, very important to all this: fun. It's making wrestling fun. And the match itself, everything that we saw this past weekend was fun, entertaining. I want more of that. And I also want to see more from Chad Gable and Kaiser, aka, the only, I guess I'm going to call him the OG now. He is the original. He is the original guy now because he's the only guy, El Grande Americano Lube Kaiser.
I'm somebody, and I know other people are saying this as well, and I'm in the same camp as somebody who went to WrestleMania in person and things like that. And obviously, WrestleMania is this big event, but I'm in the same camp as everybody else saying that, at first we're all wondering why this wasn't a part of WrestleMania, could get AAA on WrestleMania, do that whole thing. We've thought that before about NXT and getting some of their big matches on WrestleMania instead of being in the own events. But in this particular case, yes, this was the perfect spot for this because this gave it its own. I mean, really, this event was only 2 hours long, and this was half of that event, right? This
Yeah.
match ends up being 30 minutes from bell to bell with a good 15 minutes at plus from the beginnings of entrances to after entrances.
Yeah.
So
Pomp and
good,
circumstances, you know?
yeah, 50 minutes essentially, almost a good full part of an hour was dedicated out of a 2 hour show to this match. And I think that it got the perfect time, right? It wasn't overshadowed. It was essentially an event that was surrounded by it. It reminded me kind of like those in your house pay-per-views back in the day. Where they would, I know Saturday's main event's kind of similar, but in your house pay-per-views where they were like an hour and a half, and they would have like an hour of filler, and then they would have the final hour, which to be dedicated to the last match. And that's what this was. And it was like a perfect event. 1 hour of good matches, and then this final match, which took it all. And I think this is why I think this is match of the year. And I know a lot of people talking about, Double or Nothing with Okada, and the match that he had, obviously, there and some other big events that occurred over this year. But the difference is, and why this is match of the year to me, is because, and this is kind of a slight on AEW, when you put out match of the year candidates so much and you essentially have us already advertised. When I go to a movie and you've already told me that Siskel and Ebert or LA Times has said this is the movie of the year, best film of the year, I've got expectations now because you're already telling me this is film of the year, right? So it doesn't take me by surprise. I'm already expecting it going forward. Nothing's going to essentially be like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. Why this is match of the year versus some of those other like Okada matches, Takahashi and Okada and things like that is because we weren't expecting this to be match of the year. We were watching this to be entertained, and then it comes out and becomes match of the year, right? Game 7 of the World Series, you're telling me if that was the best game of the season last year, you already kind of came in with the preconceived notion that it's already Game 7 of a World Series. It's already the Super Bowl. It's already Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. You already have some of those underlining things. And I know mask versus mask is important, but we watched this thinking this could just be a match that we're not talking about this for 20 minutes today on the podcast at all, right? It could have just been like, yeah, that was all right. But it became match of the year. It took something that we weren't expecting and took us on that ride. And I like when that happens in sports. I like that when that happens in wrestling. I like when we're talking about matches that weren't advertised ahead of time, right? This isn't WrestleMania 2022 where this is the greatest wrestling, what Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, what did they have that? The greatest main event in WrestleMania history or whatever. Yeah. Or the nonsense they had with Edge and Randy Orton during COVID, the greatest wrestling match ever. Like, we don't need that ahead of time. We want it to just organically become that. And that's what this was. And I think that's why this is match of the year. And boy, I didn't, a lot of people are saying Undertaker, Booker of the year all of a sudden. And good on him, because this has got to be a tough thing to book.
I don't know if you heard this, but I don't know if it's 100% true. You never know what you see on the internet. Mm-hmm. But I read a report that Pete Dunne helped produce that match.
Yeah, I read that as well, which is, I guess, kind of crazy because, right, isn't he involved in the kind of entourages of
How cool
these
is that,
folks?
though, for Pete to get this love?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
It's weird that I guess he's dipping his toe into doing that. You know what I mean? Because normally, obviously, the people who are producing matches are the people who are no longer competing anymore.
You know what? I think he's expanding his horizons because I think he understands that he's not going to be wrestling forever. So you know what? If you know,
he's also understanding that he's like a guy in like AAA baseball who's not getting his shot at the major leagues, so we might as well start learning how. Because they always have those guys out in AAA baseball or in AHL hockey that are just like, hey, I might as well start learning how to coach because I'm realizing that this is going to be less about me and more about the others. So I got to start retooling. And maybe he's starting to see, hey, another WrestleMania went by that I wasn't in the main event or on the card. Another Royal Rumble went by I didn't win.
Plus, you know what? It'll be good for him later on because if he's getting kind of like under the tutelage of some of the Michael Hayeses of the world and the Bruce Pritchards and all that, and under that learning tree, the sky's the limit. for Pete Dunne, because if this is something he truly he sunk his teeth in and helped create, good for him.
Overall, down at AAA, like I really want to give props to the Undertaker because of the fact that I know wrestling's wrestling, and Vince McMahon always kind of sold it as that it's something that works all over the world. It translates through all languages. But being able to be the producer of a wrestling organization that really is grained in a certain culture that you're not from, right? He didn't come up in the Mexican culture. He's not Rey Mysterio. If Rey Mysterio was producing this, it'd be a different story. But The Undertaker it'd be like me producing Japanese wrestling, right? I watch it from afar. I've seen it, but I don't really fully understand it the exact way that they understand it and what exactly gets them going and the history of it and how it matters so much to that culture. For The Undertaker to, again, just like Ludwig Kaiser, right, to be an outsider and to be able to produce this. Triple H can produce WWE. He was in WWE. It's an American product. That's understandable. But for The Undertaker to go into a country and a culture and a wrestling organization that looks a lot different and responds to things differently and wants things differently and likes the wrestlers differently than they do, and to be able to meet their needs for it is definitely a tough thing to do.
You're spot on. Kudos to Undertaker as well. Praise has to go his way too, because he has put on a lot of great stuff since he's been down working in AAA.
One thing I want to just note that's not really necessarily to the match itself, but I was just kind of curious, and doing some stuff on Ludwig Kaiser, obviously since he's got his new girlfriend, and who could ever, and this is no disrespect, but who could ever think that you could upgrade, right? And I don't want to say maybe upgrade, maybe that's a rude thing to say, but definitely match that level, if not better, when it comes to Ludwig Kaiser with Tiffany Stratton, his new girlfriend, right? It's got to be tough for Tiffany Stratton to watch. I don't know how that relationship ended, but
who I feel bad for? I feel so bad for Ludwig Kaiser. It's a tough life for him.
Yeah, I mean, literally going from Tiffany Stratton to, I mean, when you're with Tiffany Stratton, you think you've reached the top, and then you find out there's another top to reach. So it's crazy that. But looking up Ludwig Kaiser and some of his, I wasn't aware. One, he's young enough to be born in the 90s, but old enough to be born in Germany that was divided at the time he was born. He was born in Western Germany. You forget how recent that stuff happened, like the Berlin Wall coming down. You forget how recent that happened. It seems like, it's history, especially if you're somebody who's very young, born in the 90s or 2000s. But, you forget that in our lifetime that happened only like 30 years ago, because he was born in Western Germany. And he's old enough, as his dad is actually not a younger person. His dad is old enough while being a child himself, so not a full-fledged adult, but his dad's old enough to have fought on behalf of the Nazis in World War II as a child soldier.
Wait, who is this? Who is it?
His dad.
No, his dad's not. His dad was an older guy. His dad was born in 1933, so the math doesn't check out there.
He was a child soldier.
Child soldier, yes. Yeah, he wasn't.
He ended up fleeing to France to get away from all of that, I read. But I mean, I guess the fact that, he's born in 1990, his dad was born in 1933. Obviously, it's very old because of the fact that my dad is about 20 plus years younger than that. And I'm also a little bit older than Ludwig. So it really kind of shows that what was he like?
And it was,
like 50 years
Ludwig
old,
was
almost
born
60
in
years old.
Yeah.
His dad was 57 when he was born.
Yeah.
Right?
And his father was one of the greatest German wrestlers of all time.
Yeah. So yeah, he fled for
great.
France and then must have come back obviously later on. But it's just, I mean, and that's not disrespect, obviously, because obviously he's a kid, so he didn't really have much choice when it comes to fighting for the Nazis. But just the fact that your direct dad, not your grandfather, not your great grandfather, but Ludwig Kaiser, who's still relatively young himself, has a dad who's old enough to have fought in World War II, and specifically, while granted, like I said, child soldier, because that's things were working a little bit differently in certain countries, fled to France. So obviously he, picked the side of good in the end, if you will. But just crazy to think that, that's kind of a history that Ludwig Kaiser looks relatively young, not, been around wrestling for super long, but has these kind of historical things a part of him that, you just think about, because these people are walking the streets and you realize that he was born in a Germany that was separated. He has a father that was old enough to fight on behalf of the Germans in World War II. Things like that is just kind of crazy. And here he is as now the face of America, if you will. I like saying it's face of America, right? As El Grande Americano and a gimmick that started very silly, and WWE kept it going out of kind of a joke because of the fact that Chad Gable got hurt. Kind of kept it going as a joke because, they didn't want to give it away that it was Chad Gable, so they said, no, he's still going, right? And it was created for Chad Gable because he couldn't beat the Luchadors and he was so annoyed by not being the Luchadors that he became El Grande Americano. So a very simple, silly, gimmick. It turned into what we just saw this past weekend. Pretty awesome, I would say. Match of the year. It's going to be very hard for anything to top that, and I don't expect anything this year in AEW or WWE to do that.
Yeah.